Value is never declared. It is perceived, felt, and most importantly, feared to be lost. Most people move through life trying to prove their worth by being louder, more available, more accommodating. They believe visibility creates value, that constant presence builds importance. But in reality, it does the opposite. The more you offer yourself freely, the less people feel they must earn you. And what is not earned is never respected. This is where the dark psychology of value begins, not in what you give, but in what you withhold. Think about it carefully. The rarest things in life are not loud or desperate for attention. They exist quietly, but their absence is deeply felt. When you are always available, always responding, always trying to please, you remove the psychological tension that creates desire. People do not fear losing you because in their mind you are always there, and when there is no fear of loss, there is no urgency to respect, prioritize, or value. To force others to respect you, you must first understand a brutal truth. People measure your value based on how easily they can access you. Scarcity creates significance. When your time, energy, and attention become selective, people begin to question their place in your world. And that question creates power. It shifts the dynamic. Instead of you seeking validation, they begin to seek yours. But this is not about playing games or becoming cold for the sake of it. It is about discipline, emotional discipline, the ability to control your impulses, to respond, to explain, to chase. Most people fail here. They feel the urge to immediately react to messages, to disrespect, to being ignored. They believe silence makes them weak. In reality, silence is one of the strongest psychological weapons. When you do not react, you create uncertainty. And uncertainty forces people to think about you more than any words ever could. Understand this deeply. When you over-explain yourself, you reduce your perceived value. When you constantly justify your actions, you position yourself as someone seeking approval. High-value individuals do not rush to be understood. They allow others to interpret them. And that mystery, that slight distance, creates intrigue. People respect what they cannot fully control or predict. Another layer of this psychology is emotional self-control. If others can easily trigger you, they will never truly respect you. Why? Because they feel power over you. Every reaction you give freely becomes a signal that your emotions are accessible, manipulatable. But when you remain composed, when you choose when and how to respond, you establish dominance, not through aggression, but through restraint. You must also learn to detach your value from external validation. This is where most people collapse. They want to be liked, accepted, praised. And in chasing this, they unconsciously lower their standards. They tolerate disrespect. They overgive. They try too hard. But the moment you stop needing approval, everything changes. Your actions become intentional, not reactive. Your presence becomes grounded, not desperate. And people can feel that shift instantly. There is also a strategic element to absence. When you are not always present, your presence gains weight. When you speak less, your words carry more impact. When you show up selectively, people pay attention. This is not accidental. It is psychological conditioning. You are training others to associate you with value by limiting exposure. And here's the paradox. The less you try to prove your worth, the more others begin to assign worth to you, because value is not in effort, it is in perception. When you appear self-contained, when you are not chasing attention, when you are not easily accessible, you signal that your life has depth, priorities, and standards, and people instinctively respect that. So if you want others to respect you, stop focusing on being liked. Focus on being disciplined, controlled, and selective. Let your absence create curiosity. Let your silence create tension. Let your standards create distance. Because in that space, in that controlled scarcity, people begin to understand your true value, not because you told them, but because they felt the risk of losing access to you. Most people destroy their value not because they lack ability, but because they lack boundaries. They give too much too quickly and to the wrong people. They confuse kindness with accessibility, generosity with constant availability. But in the psychology of power and respect, boundaries are not optional. They are the foundation of how others measure your worth. Without boundaries, you are seen as replaceable. With them, you become someone who must be handled with care. Understand this clearly. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you lower your perceived value. Not immediately, not obviously, but subtly, over time. People begin to sense that your time is not protected, that your attention is easy to obtain. And once that perception is formed, it is difficult to reverse because people do not consciously think this person has no boundaries. They simply feel it. And that feeling shapes how they treat you. High-value individuals operate differently. They are selective, not rude, not arrogant, but intentional. They do not respond instantly to everything. They do not make themselves available to everyone. And most importantly, they do not negotiate their standards to avoid discomfort because they understand something most people ignore. Respect is not given to those who are easy to deal with. It is given to those who are difficult to misuse. There is a certain tension that boundaries create. When you begin to say no, when you start delaying responses, when you stop over-explaining yourself, people will react. Some will test you, some will try to push past your limits. This is where most people fail. They panic. They think they are losing connection, losing approval. So they retreat back into old patterns, overgiving, over-explaining, overcompensating. But this reaction is exactly what keeps them stuck. You must learn to sit in that tension, because that tension is a sign that your value is rising. When people can no longer predict your reactions, when they are unsure how far they can push you, they begin to adjust their behavior. And this is where respect is formed, not through what you say, but through what you consistently allow and what you refuse. Another critical aspect is emotional boundaries. It is not just about your time, but about your reaction. If someone disrespects you and you immediately react with anger or desperation, you give them control. You show them exactly how to manipulate you. But when you remain calm, when you choose not to engage in unnecessary conflict, you send a different signal. You show that your emotional state is not easily accessible, and that creates distance, powerful psychological distance. People often misunderstand boundaries as something external, like rules you impose on others. But real boundaries are internal. They are decisions you make about your own behavior. You are not controlling others, you are controlling yourself. You are deciding what you tolerate, what you engage with, and what you walk away from. And that self-control is what others interpret as strength. There is also a strategic silence that comes with strong boundaries. You do not need to explain every decision. You do not need to justify every absence. In fact, the more you explain, the more you weaken your position, because explanation often comes from a place of seeking approval. And the moment you seek approval, you shift the power dynamic. Instead, you must become comfortable with being misunderstood. This is difficult because humans naturally want to be seen and validated. But high-value individuals accept that not everyone will understand them, and they are fine with that, because their focus is not on being liked, it is on being respected. Over time, as you enforce these boundaries, something interesting happens. People begin to treat you differently. They become more careful with their words. They respect your time more. They think twice before crossing a line, not because you demanded it, but because your behavior trained them to. And this is the essence of the dark psychology of value. You do not force respect directly. You create conditions where disrespect becomes costly, where access to you is no longer guaranteed, where your presence feels earned, not given. So stop trying to be endlessly available. Stop believing that saying yes will make people value you more. It won't. It will only make you easier to replace. Instead, protect your time, control your reactions, and let your boundaries do what words never can. Teach people how to treat you. Most people misunderstand power because they think it comes from speaking louder, showing more, or proving themselves constantly. But real power, the kind that forces respect without asking for it, comes from restraint. It comes from what you choose not to reveal, what you choose not to react to, and what you deliberately keep hidden. When you expose everything about yourself, your plans, your emotions, your next move, you make yourself predictable, and predictability is weakness. People begin to read you, anticipate you, and eventually control how they interact with you. But when you become controlled, measured, and slightly mysterious, something shifts. People can no longer figure you out completely, and that uncertainty creates tension. That tension creates respect. Think about it carefully. The people who hold the most influence are rarely the ones constantly explaining themselves. They don't rush to defend every misunderstanding. They don't overshare their intentions, and they don't react emotionally to every situation. Instead, they observe. They listen more than they speak. And when they do speak, their words carry weight because they are rare, intentional, and precise. This is not accidental. It is strategic. When you speak less, people pay more attention. When you reveal less, people become more curious. And when you react less, begin to question their own position around you. This is where most people fail. They feel the urge to explain everything, to justify their actions, to be understood at all times. But that need to be understood is actually a form of weakness. It signals that you depend on others' approval. And once people sense that, they begin to take advantage of it, even unconsciously. They push boundaries, test your reactions, and slowly reduce the level of respect they give you. But when you remove that need, when you become comfortable being misunderstood, something powerful happens. You take back control. Silence becomes your weapon, not the silence of fear, but the silence of control. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't react, they lose power. When someone expects an explanation and you don't give one, they feel unsettled. When people cannot easily access your thoughts, your emotions, or your intentions, they begin to assign value to your presence. Scarcity creates value, and this applies not only to things, but to people as well. At the same time, this does not mean you become distant or cold without purpose. It means you become selective. You choose carefully who gets access to your time, your energy, and your thoughts. You do not give everyone the same level of openness, because when everyone has equal access to you, you become common. And when you are common, you are easily replaceable. But when access to you feels limited, controlled, and earned, people begin to treat it differently. They become more cautious, more respectful, and more aware of your worth. There is also a psychological effect at play here. Humans naturally try to fill gaps. When they don't fully understand something, they begin to think about it more. They analyze it, question it, and even project their own assumptions onto it. When you are slightly mysterious, people think about you more. They try to understand you, to decode you, and in that process, your presence grows in their mind. You become more significant without doing anything extra. But to reach this level, you must develop discipline, because the urge to react, to explain, to prove yourself, it is strong. It comes from ego, from insecurity, from the desire to be seen and validated. You have to rise above that. You have to train yourself to pause, to observe, and to respond only when necessary. Every reaction you control increases your power. Every unnecessary word you avoid strengthens your position. Over time, this transforms how people perceive you. You are no longer someone they can easily read or manipulate. You become someone they approach with caution, someone they think twice before disrespecting, not because you demanded it, but because your behavior quietly enforced it. So understand this clearly. The less you reveal, the more you control, and the more you control, the more they respect you. Most people believe respect comes from being liked, from being agreeable, from making sure no one ever feels uncomfortable around them. But this is one of the most dangerous illusions you can live under, because the more you try to be liked, the more you dilute your presence. You become predictable, soft, and easy to overlook. People may enjoy you, they may smile around you, but deep inside, they do not take you seriously. And without seriousness, there is no real respect, only temporary approval. There is a fundamental difference between being liked and being respected. Being liked is emotional, unstable, and easily lost. It depends on moods, situations, and convenience. Respect, on the other hand, is psychological. It is rooted in how people perceive your strength, your standards, and your willingness to walk away. And here is the truth most people avoid. Respect often requires a level of discomfort. It requires you to say things others don't want to hear. It requires you to stand firm when others expect you to bend. And most importantly, it requires you to risk being disliked. This is where transformation begins. The moment you stop prioritizing approval, your entire energy shifts. You stop over-smiling, over-explaining, and overcompensating. You begin to speak with clarity instead of hesitation. Your words become direct, not aggressive, but firm. And that firmness creates a subtle pressure. People begin to feel that you are not someone who can be easily manipulated or emotionally influenced. Think about the people who command real respect in any environment. They are not constantly trying to please everyone. They are not afraid of disagreement. In fact, they often create it, not for conflict, but because they are grounded in their own standards. They know what they stand for, and they are willing to defend it without needing validation. That is what makes others adjust around them. But stepping into this mindset is not easy, because when you stop seeking approval, people notice. Some will question your change. Some will accuse you of being different, distant, or even arrogant. This is the test, and most people fail it. They retreat. They try to explain themselves, to soften their stance, to regain that lost approval. But in doing so, they destroy the very respect they were beginning to build. You have to understand that losing certain people's approval is not a loss. It is a filter. It removes those who only valued you when you were easy to control, and it makes space for a different kind of interaction, one built on mutual respect rather than emotional dependency. This is not about pushing people away. It is about allowing only the right kind of connection to remain. Another critical shift is how you handle disagreement. When you are approval-driven, disagreement feels like rejection. You take it personally. You try to fix it immediately. But when you are grounded in your own value, disagreement becomes neutral. You don't rush to resolve it. You don't feel the need to win every argument or to be understood in every moment. You simply state your position and let it stand. And that calm confidence sends a powerful signal. You are not here to be accepted. You are here to be respected. There is also a hidden power in not reacting to every opinion. People will always have something to say. They will judge, criticize, and form assumptions. If you try to respond to all of it, you lose control of your own narrative. But when you choose silence, when you allow people to think what they want without rushing to correct them, you create psychological distance. And in that distance, your presence becomes stronger, not weaker. Over time, this approach reshapes your entire identity in the eyes of others. You are no longer seen as someone who seeks permission. You become someone who sets the tone, someone whose presence carries weight, not because of noise, but because of control. And control is what people respect the most, even if they don't consciously realize it. So let go of the need to be liked by everyone. It is a losing game. You will exhaust yourself trying to maintain it, and in the end, you will still lose respect. Instead, stand firm in who you are, accept that not everyone will agree with you, and understand that true respect begins the moment you are willing to be misunderstood. Most people think strength is loud. They think it shows itself in dominance and aggression, in forcing others to submit. But real strength, the kind that commands silent respect, operates differently. It is controlled, disciplined, and most importantly, it is consistent. Because consistency is what separates temporary influence from permanent authority. Anyone can act strong for a moment. Anyone can raise their voice, make a bold statement, or assert themselves once, but very few people can maintain that standard over time without breaking under pressure. And people are always watching for that break. Understand this deeply. People don't respect what you say. They respect what you repeatedly demonstrate. Your behavior patterns teach others how to treat you, not your words, not your intentions, your patterns. If you tolerate disrespect once, you've planted a seed. If you tolerate it twice, you've confirmed it. And if you continue to allow it, you've trained people that crossing your boundaries has no real consequences. This is how people lose control of their image without even realizing it. Consistency, however, changes everything. When you react the same way every time your boundaries are tested, calm, firm, and unshaken, you create predictability of a different kind. Not the weak kind that makes you easy to manipulate, but the strong kind that makes you difficult to challenge. People begin to understand that your standards are not flexible based on mood or situation, they are fixed, and that realization forces them to adjust their behavior before even approaching you. This is where discipline becomes essential, because consistency is not natural. Your emotions will try to interfere. Some days you will feel tired, distracted, or less willing to confront situations. Some moments will tempt you to let things slide just to avoid conflict, and that is exactly where most people collapse. They compromise once, thinking it's insignificant, but others notice. They always notice. And once they sense inconsistency, they begin to test you more. You must eliminate that gap between what you say and what you do. If you decide that something is unacceptable, then it must remain unacceptable every single time. No exceptions based on convenience, emotion, or who the person is. Because the moment you create exceptions, you weaken the entire structure of your authority. People will start to look for loopholes. They will try to find the version of you that is easier to deal with. And if they find it, that becomes the version they interact with. There is also a quiet power in controlled reactions. When you remain composed in situations where others would react emotionally, it creates a psychological imbalance. People expect reactions, they expect anger, frustration, or defensiveness, and when they don't get it, they become uncertain. That uncertainty shifts control to you, but this only works if it is consistent. If you are calm one day and reactive the next, people will simply wait for the reactive version of you to appear. Another important aspect is follow through. Many people set boundaries, but they don't enforce them. They say no, but then they explain themselves into a yes. They show resistance, but then they back down when faced with pressure. This destroys credibility because people don't take your words seriously if they know your actions won't match them. But when you follow through, when your actions align perfectly with your words, you build a reputation, and reputation is one of the strongest forms of power. Over time, this consistency builds an invisible structure around you. People begin to understand that certain behaviors will not be tolerated. They adjust without being told. They respect your time without being reminded. They choose their words more carefully around you. And all of this happens without you needing to constantly assert yourself because your past behavior has already done the work for you. This is the level most people never reach. They rely on occasional displays of strength instead of building a consistent identity. But occasional strength is unreliable. It creates confusion, not respect. People don't know which version of you they will get, so they take chances. But when you are consistent, there are no chances to take. The rules are clear, even if they are unspoken. So stop focusing on appearing strong in isolated moments. Focus on being unshakably consistent in your standards, your reactions, and your behavior, because consistency is what turns temporary control into lasting power. You must understand that true power is never loud, never desperate, and never constantly seeking validation. It is quiet, controlled, and almost unsettling in its presence. When you begin to master emotional discipline, you create a psychological imbalance in others. They can no longer predict you, read you, or manipulate you. Most people are ruled by impulses. They react quickly, speak too much, reveal their insecurities without realizing it. But you, if you are to become valuable in the deepest sense, must move differently. You must train yourself to pause when others rush, to stay silent when others overshare, and to remain composed when others lose control. This calmness is not weakness, it is calculated restraint. It signals that you are not easily shaken, not easily influenced, and therefore not easily replaced. People instinctively respect what they cannot control. When someone tries to provoke you and fails, they feel a subtle loss of power. When they expect a reaction and receive none, their mind begins to question your depth. This is where your value begins to rise, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Discipline then becomes your armor. It is not just about waking up early or working hard. It is about mastering your inner world. It is about refusing to let emotions dictate your actions. When you feel anger, you do not explode, you observe. When you feel the urge to impress, you withdraw. When you feel the need for approval, you remind yourself that validation is a trap designed to make you dependent. The more disciplined you become, the more independent you appear. And independence is one of the rarest currencies in human interaction. People are drawn to those who do not need them, yet choose to engage. That choice creates value. Scarcity is not just about absence, it is about controlled presence. You do not show up everywhere, you do not give your time freely, and you do not make yourself constantly available. Instead, you become selective. You decide where your energy goes, who earns your attention, and when you step back. This creates a subtle tension. People begin to wonder about you, to anticipate your presence, to value your time more because it is not easily accessible. This is the dark psychology of value. What is limited becomes desired, and what is desired becomes respected. But this only works if your absence is backed by substance. You must be someone worth missing. Your silence must carry weight, your presence must shift the atmosphere, and your actions must reflect consistency. Inconsistency destroys value faster than anything else. If you are calm one day and chaotic the next, disciplined one moment and careless the next, people will not know what to expect, and not in a powerful way, but in a way that diminishes trust. True unpredictability comes from control, not randomness. It comes from choosing when to reveal and when to conceal, when to engage and when to withdraw. Over time, this creates an aura, something people cannot fully explain but cannot ignore either. They begin to treat you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because your behavior left them no other option. And this is the ultimate shift. You stop chasing respect and start becoming the kind of person who naturally commands it. You realize that forcing others to respect you is not about confrontation or dominance. It is about self-mastery. When you control your reactions, you control the narrative. When you control your time, you control your value. When you control your presence, you control how others perceive you. Most people never reach this level because it requires patience, discipline, and the willingness to let go of immediate gratification. But if you commit to this path, you will notice something profound. People will start to fear losing access to you, not because you threatened them, but because you became rare in a world full of noise and desperation. And once you reach that level, you no longer need to prove anything to anyone.